Welcome everyone to the most exciting clash of the Clutch Chess Champions Showdown. It's the final day and Caruana is trailing Magnus Carlsen by 3 points. But it's not a big deal because every win on the final day of this format gets you 3 points. Which means that if Caruana manages to beat Magnus in both their games, he will take the lead. And there you have Magnus coming in, a handshake here. Magnus just beat Gukesh 2-0, while Fabi beat Hikaru with 1 win and 1 draw. We are getting ready here as both players take their seat, a handshake, and this, dear friends, is the Duolingo recap of the round. Duolingo is an app where you can learn many languages, but now they've introduced a chess course which can help you become a better chess player. So download the app and get going. Just like how Magnus Carlsen is going to get going here. He adjusts all his pieces and he begins with knight to f3. Caruana thinks for a bit for his first move. Maybe the first move came as a bit of a surprise. He plays c5. And now Magnus, will he go c4? Will he go g3? He goes pawn to c4. The symmetrical English is on the board. Fabi can go g6, knight c6, many options here. You can even play knight to f6, e6. He goes g6 here. And Magnus goes pawn to d4. Takes on d4, knight takes. And now the knight comes out to c6. We could very well go into accelerated dragon territory. And we have with pawn to e4. We are now in Sicilian dragon, the accelerated variation territory. e4 played. And Fabiano brings his knight out to f6, attacking the pawn on e4. Knight to c3. And he goes d6. Now, Accelerated Dragon is an opening that I have played a lot in my career, and it's supposed to be one where black's moves are pretty simple. Goes bishop g7, castles, takes on d4, then brings the bishop out, queen goes to a5, sometimes a5, a4 is played. You bring your rook, either this one or this one, to c8, put pressure here. The moves are easy in a rapid game. Bishop e2 played by Magnus. He takes on d4, queen takes d4, bishop g7. You can see Fabi moving quickly here. Now this is some pressure, but there's no good discovery. He goes bishop e3. And now you just castle. Exactly. So castles here. The pawns on e4 and c4. These two pawns give white a lot of space and also control. a5 played by Fabi. He's going for a4, a3. Also knight d7 to c5 is a common plan. White castles here and a4 pushed in. How does Magnus continue here is the question. There are plans. You can go f4, try to be aggressive. You can play f3. You can bring your f rook to c1. You can bring your a rook to b1. He brings his f rook to d1. And Magnus gets off his jacket. Bishop e6, putting pressure on the c4 pawn. Maybe just queen a5 followed by rook fc8. This seems like the logical way to proceed. In such positions, it's important for white to come up with some kind of a plan. He goes bishop d4. A very interesting move here by Magnus. And I believe he wants to bring his queen to e3. Caruana goes with his queen to a5. Queen e3 is on the board. What about rook fc8? Do you want to put pressure on the pawn here on c4? I think makes a lot of sense. He first goes knight d7. And trading these bishops is definitely part of the plan for black. Because then once you trade them, you push a3, the dark squares can become weak. But Magnus simply jumps into d5, attacking the e7 pawn. It's clear that black must take on d5. So Fabi takes it. And now first you take ED or you can take on G7. Both moves seem plausible here. He takes on G7, King takes G7 and E takes D5 taken here. Now the E7 pawn is under pressure. And one of the things that has happened here is that white is left with a slightly worse bishop, while this is a very strong knight. By the way, Queen E7 does not work here because of Rook F E8 takes. You take on E2 with pressure on the F2 point. So Magnus, and trading the queens would be not so great. So Magnus gives a check. Knight comes to F6. And how will Magnus continue here? He goes Rook D4. I love this move. A Rook swing to H4 followed by maybe the Queen landing here. Could be such an exciting idea. Fabi gets Rook FC8. He needs some play. He feels a bit cramped here for space. But he is coming in with maybe Queen C5 and B5. C4 pawn, maybe slightly soft. Rook comes to D1. And now do you give Queen A5? I mean, if the queens come off the board, black should be fine. Rook C5 played. And how is Magnus going to continue here? Whoa, he goes G4. What a beautiful move here. He's threatening G5 and then a discovered check in this position. Well, incredible understanding of chess for Magnus. He gets it that even though he weakens his king, it's not a big deal. H4 now. Whew. One idea can be G5, the other can be H5, H6. Hitting on this diagonal, he goes Rook E8. I'm not so sure what the Rook is doing over there. Maybe at some point he wants to play E5. G5 played. The knight goes back to D7. And then Rook E4. Putting pressure on E7 point. And now the idea, once again, H5, H6, definitely possible. If you jump in knight E5, I'll go B4. He goes Queen C7. And now B4. Seems like a great move. Great move, but Magnus goes Queen E3. He's putting pressure on the E7 point here. Gets the queen out of this file. And B5, Caruana doesn't mind Rook E7, Queen E7 because after B takes C4, he thinks he has enough play. So Magnus here goes B4. AB taken. I'm not so sure about this position. Is black getting some counterplay? Maybe instead of B4, it was nicer to take on D5. But now Fabi's thinking. He takes on C4. And B4 played. Rook B5. He takes on C4. The position is complex. It's around equal. The D5 pawn is a bit weak. But so is the black king. He goes Queen B7. And now Magnus must understand that perhaps Rook C7. Trading rooks is the best move. He plays it. Queen takes and bishop takes on B5. Pinning here. But then you have Rook B8, which is a nice move. He finds it. No time to take on E7. B5 is hanging. And so he goes Rook to C1. Queen goes back to D8, defending the pawn on E7. He takes, and Queen to D4. You can see that the material is even. White has an extra queenside pawn. But also his king is weak. So Queen F5 played. And now Rook to C7 by Magnus. Oof. Pressure here is huge. Now if check, he first plays E5, DE, Queen E6. That's a good move by Fabi, getting some breathing space for himself. And Magnus comes back Rook C6, but doesn't matter. You can go Rook D8. Seems like a good move. Also Queen E5. He plays h6, and this is actually a big mistake because g takes h6 is possible now. G takes h6. I don't know what is Fabi's idea to checkmate here. Maybe he wants to play queen e5 next. I'm not so sure. And Magnus is thinking, well, he can take the pawn, but instead he goes rook takes d6, check, king g2, now takes on g5. Takes back at g5, queen comes to e7. You can see that there is pressure here and also on the pawn here on b4. So rook d5, fantastic move. The point is queen b4 is met with rook d8 and you lose the queen, and taking here also loses to rook d8. So he goes queen b7, pinning the rook. King g1 played. Coming out of the pin, queen to c7. Magnus somehow magically creating something out of nothing in this game. b5, queen c1 check, king g2 played. Queen comes back to c7 here for black, and now white is thinking. Magnus goes rook to d7. Attacks the queen, queen b6, offering a trade of queens. But this is something that Magnus should be very happy with. He takes the queen, rook takes, and brings his rook back. Now this rook defends the pawn, also is in a good position. Black rook is passive, and slowly you can get the white king into the game. f6, f4 played. Very nice move. Very nice move. Takes, king f7. He brings his king in. Black also brings his king in. King e4 played. And the rook comes to b8. How should white make progress? Maybe just bring the king over to the other side. He goes rook c5. King to d7 played. And king to d5. He brings his rook to f8. Now threatening a check perhaps. Goes b6. Wow. It's bold to push the pawn forward. Rook check. King goes here. Rook f1. And maybe king b5. King a6. Just hide behind the b pawn. Could be an idea there. But Magnus pushes his b pawn. Very nice move. If rook b1, there's rook b5. And in case of a check, I can go king b5. The totally winning position. Notice that after rook trade, he goes king b5. Takes here. If king c7, you win this pawn. I go and win the g pawn. Fabiano resigns. Magnus wins this game. I must say, one of the most beautiful games I have seen in 10-minute format. Such great understanding shown by Magnus. Such deep understanding. Fabi also played brilliantly to hold the balance till a point. But eventually, it was the GOAT who triumphed. Amazing, amazing chess by Magnus Carlsen. Hi everyone, I hope you enjoyed the game. I want to tell you about Duolingo. This app, I used it extensively to learn languages when I was young. But I'm so thrilled that it now has chess on it. If you are a beginner, there are beginners courses here. If you are an advanced player, you also have different kinds of checkmates, different types of tactics, opening ideas. So you can make use of all of this. And what is very exciting is the way in which it is being taught. Oscar teaches you, who is a fun-loving character and a tutor, and it will give you some hints. There are streaks which are created. There are daily tasks that you can achieve. There are rewards. You can play against Oscar, and there's also a leaderboard. By the way, I'm leading on the leaderboard. My ID is Sagar Chess 1. Let's see if you can challenge me and get ahead of me. Download the app Duolingo and start your chess journey no matter what your level is. And let's get better at chess.